Hello, everyone. In today's lecture on verbal aptitude, we shall be discussing the section vocabulary. So, I would be reading out a few pages of three of my favorite books to you and introducing meanings from each page, right? So, that would be interesting for you as well and fun for me as well, right? And then we would be discussing the questions that appeared in the GATE examinations from vocabulary previously. And with time, you'll get a hang of how to answer vocabulary questions, even if you do not know the direct meaning, right? Starting with my favorite book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is actually a book from 1946, I think, yeah, 1946, that talks about Viktor Frankl's, the author's, experiences in a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. So we would now be reading a page or two of this book and looking at the meanings of new words at each page. The book does not claim to be an account of facts and events, but of personal experiences, experiences which millions of prisoners have suffered time and again. It is the inside story of a concentration camp told by one of its survivors. This tale is not concerned with the great horrors which have already been described often enough, though less often believed, but with a multitude of small torments. In other words, it will try to address this question: how was everyday life in a concentration camp reflected in the mind of an average prisoner? Most of the events described here did not take place in large and famous camps, but in small ones where most of the real extermination took place. So here, extermination is used as a noun. It describes the act or process of completely destroying or eliminating something. That here we are talking about eliminating prisoners, right? The story is not about the suffering and death of great heroes and martyrs, nor is it about the prominent capos, prisoners who acted as trustees having special privileges or well-known prisoners. Thus, it is not so much concerned with the sufferings of the mighty, but with the sacrifices, the crucifixion, and the deaths of the great army of the unknown and unrecorded victims. It was these common prisoners who bore no distinguishing marks on their sleeves, whom the capers really despised. So crucifixion here again is used as a noun. It is talking about the method. Mm, it's talking, you can obviously relate that it's something like death because it's used with death, the crucifixion and deaths of the great army. So crucifixion is a method of execution in which a person is nailed or otherwise attached to a cross and left to die, right? Okay. And despised is obviously an adjective, the past participle of the verb despise. It is regarded with intense dislike or scorn. So it's talking about those prisoners that the capos really despised, that they really hated, that they really disapproved of, right? So this is the author talking about his own experience, and I really, really recommend you to read this book. You'll get to know a lot of new words. You'll get to know a lot of new events that happened during the Second World War, especially with prisoners like him. It's it's really a book that will provide you with great insights from the World War, from the history of the world, from a personal experience of a prisoner. It's recommended from my side. Do read it. Get to know a lot of new meanings as you read it. It would be fun, right? Now, the second book we are going to talk about is 1984, written by George Orwell. Again, one of the very fascinating books I've come across. Even though the name of the book is 1984, it was not published in 1984. It was published in 1949. Right. And it is, it actually talks about, a lot of themes like mass surveillance and totalitarianism, it examines the role of truth and facts within societies and how they can be manipulated. It's a very beautiful novel that I came across during my literature studies. So again, we would be reading 2 pages from this book, getting to know a lot of new words, right? So let's start. It was a bright cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the wild wind. So it's talking about chin nuzzled into his breast. That is rubbed or pushed into his breast. It's something like this, something like this, right? In an effort to escape the wild wind, that is the unpleasant wind, the something that's too harsh and unpleasant is wild. It's used as an adjective here. Slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Madison's uh, mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. Excuse me. So it's talking about how it's providing a setting about how Winston Smith, with his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the wild wind, quickly opens the doors and enters in, although he does it all so quickly, but then again not so quickly um, that he couldn't stop the swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. The swirl means a twisting or spiraling motion of the dust. And gritty dust is actually the dust of rough texture, coarse particles. So they also entered along with him, however quickly he entered, right? The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of the colored poster, too large for indoor display, had been tagged to the wall. Tagged, attached, fastened with a small nail with flat tip and some flat tip, right? So it depicted simply an enormous face, more than a meter wide, the face of a man of about 45 with a heavy black mustache and ruggedly handsome features. Ruggedly, as in, it's used as an adverb, right? Could be used as an adverb as well, having a sturdy or robust quality, or something that's really prominent, something that shines out, um, or something that's, hard. So yeah, Winston uh, made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift, even at the best of the times. It was seldom working, and at present, the electric current was cut off during the daylight hours. It was the part of the economy drive in the preparation of the hate week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39, and had a varicose ulcer. Varicose is used as an adjective here. That is an abnormally swollen, irregularly swollen ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly and resting several times on the way. On each landing, opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived is used as an adjective here, deliberately created, that the eyes follow you um, about when you move. Big Brother is watching you. The caption beneath it ran. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from an oblong metal plate like a dulled mirror which formed part of the surface of the right hand wall. Oblong, that is something that is elongated, something that is more long than wide. It could, something like an elliptical shape or rectangular shape, if you imagine, right? Okay, so Winston turned a switch and the voice sank somewhat, though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window, a smallish frail figure of meagerness. Meagerness, weakness, like something that talks about meager, like lack of quantity or quality or richness or scarcity. It's used as a noun here. Um, you know, he moved over to a window, a smallish, frail figure. Frail is weak, with the meagerness of his body, merely empathized by the blue overalls, which were the uniform of the party. His hair were very fair, his face naturally sanguine, that is, naturally um, optimistic, confident, hopeful. His skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades, and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Outside, even though the shut window pane, the world, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down in the street, the little eddies of wind were whirling dust. Eddies, eddies are those circular currents of wind that they are talking about here, especially when moving against the main current. Right? It's a whirlpool kind of motion, the one you see in washing machines as well. Right? Of wind, okay, were whirling dust and torn paper into spirals. And though the sun was shining and the sky a harsh blue, there seemed to be no color in anything except the posters that were plastered everywhere. Everything to him seemed dark and hazy. There was no color. He's talking about how the eddies of wind were whirling, um, dust and torn papers into spirals. Everything, even though the sun was shining, it was harsh blue. There seemed to be no color in anything at all except those posters that were plastered everywhere reading Big Brother is watching. Right? Whirling is basically moving or turning rapidly into circular motion. Again, as it is used as with eddies of wind, it would be whirling, like moving in a circular motion. Right? Because we move ahead. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. The mustachioed face, as on the poster, it gazed down on every commanding corner. There was one on the house front immediately opposite. Big Brother is watching you, the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Down at the street level, another poster, torn at one corner, flapped fitfully in the wind, alternately covering and uncovering the single word "INSOC." In the far distance, a helicopter skimmed down between the roofs, hovered for an instant like a blue bottle, and darted away again with a curving flight. Hovered, as in, like this. It's basically a verb. It means basically remain suspended in the air, often by fluttering wings like this, or some mechanism to linger, basically stay in one place, right? Okay. Hovered for an instant like a blue bottle and darted away again with a curving flight. That is, went away again with a curving flight. It was the police patrol snooping into people's windows. That is, investigating into people's windows, prying into private affairs of people. Right? The patrols did not matter, however, only the thought police mattered. Behind Winston's back, the voice from the telescreen was still babbling away, basically saying any babbling is basically uttering words that don't make sense, saying something or the other about pig iron and the overfulfillment of the ninth 3-year plan. The telescreen received and transmitted simultaneously any sound that Winston made above the level of a very low whisper. would be picked up by it. Moreover, so long as he remained within the field of vision which the metal plate commanded. He could be seen as well as heard. There were, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. How often or on what system the thoughtfulest plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork. How often or on what system the thoughtful is plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork, totally guesswork. So here, you've gotten to know a lot of meanings and their parts of speech. I do recommend you to read the entire novel and get to know a lot of new words from it, right? Um, Now we would go on to our third and my most favorite novel, The Trial, right? The words here might be the new words here might be might be lesser, but the novel is an ultimate story. Uh, so Franz Kafka wrote the novel in around 1914-15, and it was published after his death in 1925. It's so The Trial is one of his best works and one of the best works entirely, right? And we would be discussing the same right now. This is the first page of his book that we would be reading. Arrest, conversation with Frau Gruback, then Fräulein Wurstner. So it's his latter name and former name. Somebody must have made a false acquisition against Joseph K. for he was arrested one morning without having done anything wrong. The cook employed by his landlady, Frog Back, who bought him his breakfast every morning at about 8 o'clock, did not come this time. That had never happened before. Kay waited for a while and with his head on his pillow looked at the old lady living opposite, who was observing him with a curiosity quite unusual for her. But then, feeling both annoyed and hungry, he rang the bell. Instantly, there was a knock at the door, and a man he had never seen before in the house came in. He was slim but solidly built, and he wore a close fitting black suit, which was provided in the manner for traveling outfits, with various pleats, pockets, buckles, buttons, and a belt. Look at how vividly and in detail he describes everything here, right? And which consequently seemed eminently practical. Eminently is an adverb here. Eminently, as in prominently, like with a distinguished degree, notably. Though one could not be quite sure what its purpose was. Who are you? Asked Kay, starting to sit up in bed. But the man ignored the question as if his appearance was to be accepted without query, and merely said, "You rang?" "Anna's supposed to be bringing me my breakfast," said Kay, and then he tried to determine through silent observation and reflection. Sorry for the noise there. Okay. "Anna's supposed to be bringing me my breakfast," said Kay, and then he tried to determine through silent observation and reflection who really the man was. The latter did not submit himself for long to this scrutiny. Scrutiny here is obviously that critical examination, observation, that sort of inspection that this guy is doing, right? But turned to the door and opened it a little to say to someone who must have been standing close behind the door, "He wants Anna to bring him his breakfast." This was followed by a short burst of laughter in the next room. From the sound, it was hard to say if several persons might not be involved, right? So basically, if you look at this, this is quite an easy language, but I want to draw your attention to the little detail of everything that the author goes into. Kafka is known for his detailing, right? And the storyline. So I would like you to read this entire novel. And yeah, that is pretty much it. Now we would be now based on the words we have studied by far and how to figure out the meanings depending upon the context in the sentences. I would like to discuss with you certain gate questions that have appeared in the exam previously, right? Okay, so discussing the questions here. The first one is she wore a lovely knit cardigan. What does the underlined word mean? What does cardigan mean? Right? So there are a few options. As you all know, cardigan is that jacket, that collarless jacket that opens down front. It's so here out of the options, scarf, shawl, jacket, and socks, it's obviously jacket, right? The second one, the dash judgment caused dash in the courthouse. The forgiving judgment that can caused heated in the courthouse doesn't make sense. The verbs are mismatched, won't work. The lenient judgment caused scoff in the courthouse. No lenient judgment has ever caused scoff in any courthouse. The heavy judgment caused brawl in the courthouse. The controversial judgment caused disarray in the courthouse. So the most likely to cause disarray in the courthouse is obviously a controversial judgment, and it goes well with both judgment and, like the controversial judgment caused disarray in the courthouse. This is the most suited, most appropriate words to fill up here, right? In case you have a contrary opinion, do let me know in comments and I shall reply back on why we have chosen the option D here, right? Okay, now moving on to the next question. The two parties were at loggerheads with each other. Here they are asking us the meaning of loggerheads. Loggerheads, okay, cannot mean alignment, misalignment, or agreement. So out of the four options, it obviously means disagreement here. Okay, next. Fill in the blank with the right word. Nuns don't live in a nursery, they don't live in a clergy, they don't live in a nunnery as well. They live in a monastery, right? So monastery is obviously a building or a place where all these monks live, right? And monks never live with nuns in like the settings that they're talking about here. So nuns live in a nunnery. Nunnery is a building where nuns are supposed to live. Actually, it's a building occupied by the community of nuns, the group of nuns, right? Okay, moving on. The government granted a 3-month moratorium. Moratorium here is the underlined word, and they've asked us the meaning. Uh, so there are four options given to us. Free essentials. The government granted a 3-month free essentials. Does not work. Like it doesn't go with the grammatical meaning of the sentence as well. Then we have free essentials. The government granted a 3-month free essentials. Again, doesn't work. The government granted a 3-month relief supply or a 3-month relief to debtors. So out of free relief supply or relief to debtors, it moratorium means a relief to debtors, not relief supply. So I think sorry. Okay. So moratorium means relief to debtors. It's a legal authorization by the government as a relief to debtors. Okay, the next one. The countryside was picturesque. Picturesque. Uh, the underlined word here, picturesque, is something that is visually very appealing in a very charming way, in a very quaint, charming way, right? So here we have four options: gloomy, colorful, happy, and attractive. So the word that goes most with the meaning is attractive, right? Okay. The last question here is we have to fill in the blank with the right word. The clerk was asked to produce a dash of the proceedings. So here it is used in a very courtroom setting. It's talking about the proceedings of which the clerk is asked to produce a written statement. So he's supposed to write everything that the proceedings are saying, and that is called a transcript, right? So the clerk was asked to produce a transcript of the proceedings. So that was it for today. Thank you so much.